The next conspiracy does not begin in darkness beneath a government building. No barrels of gunpowder or assassins. This one begins inside offices, with forms and signatures. Men in suits convincing themselves that they are doing necessary things for national security. And somehow that's a little colder, because after the Watergate scandal, conspiracy changes again. Now the fear isn't who's trying to seize power, it's what are powerful institutions quietly doing while nobody's watching.
I walk through silence, thick and cold, where shadows drift and time grows old. No voice to call, no path to take, just fog and fear with every ache. Souls in the fog.
America in the 1950s lives nervously. The Cold War presses into every aspect of life. School children duck beneath desks during bomb drills. Politicians speak in language thick with existential dread and danger. Newspapers drip anxiety about spies, infiltration, communism, and betrayal. The enemy feels invisible, and invisible enemies make governments paranoid. Washington becomes a city of locked doors, classified files, whispered briefings, and men speaking carefully in rooms without windows. Inside that world sits the Central Intelligence Agency. Young, powerful, and increasingly afraid. Because somewhere inside intelligence circles, stories are spreading. Stories about mind control, brainwashing, and psychological manipulation. American prisoners from the Korean War returned with troubling accounts. Communist interrogation methods began sounding frighteningly effective. Rumors swirled that foreign powers, especially the Soviet Union and China, may be learning how to reshape loyalty itself. Imagine the mood at Langley. A secure room with ashtrays overflowing, the coffee's gone bitter from sitting too long, men in ties leaning over reports while someone asks a question that sounds impossible, but dangerous enough that nobody's laughing. What if someone learns how to control the human mind, and once a fear like that enters the room, ethics leave quietly through the cat door? The project begins under another name first, and then another, and eventually it becomes one that we're all familiar with, MKUltra. The name sounds clinical, like a bureaucratic title designed to reveal absolutely nothing. Imagine folders stamped classified, locked cabinets, budgets hidden inside of other budgets, paperwork written carefully enough that outsiders never understand what sits beneath the surface, because secrecy matters. Secrecy is the point, the whole point. At its center of much of it stands a chemist named Sidney Gottlieb. Brilliant and quite eccentric, which herein means that he was an asshat of the highest order. Connected enough to do evil things to unconsenting individuals and not go to prison. A man who, depending on perspective, looks either like a patriot protecting his country or someone opening a very dangerous door. The early questions felt scientific. Could drugs influence memory? Could chemicals weaken resistance? Could interrogation become more effective? Could personalities be altered? And then comes LSD. New, strange, and poorly understood. A chemical capable of distorting perception. Very, very dramatically. Inside CIA circles, the fascination grows. Imagine conversations in secure offices, smoke hanging heavy, pages turning, excited nervousness creeping into voices. What happens if someone receives it without knowing? Could truth be extracted? Could resistance collapse? Could minds be reshaped? And this is where the story gets uncomfortable. Because conspiracies once happened against rulers, against leaders, and now secrecy begins surrounding experiments carried out by institutions. Not open science, not informed consent, quiet programs at universities and hospitals around the country and around the world. Front organizations with money moving invisibly. Researchers sometimes unaware of who actually funds their research. And somewhere in all of it, people begin becoming test subjects. Some willingly, some very much not. On an ordinary afternoon, a drink is handed across the table. It's just a harmless clinical study. The patient trusting a doctor. No dramatic music. No warning. Just everyday life quietly intersecting with something hidden. Because the frightening thing about modern conspiracies is you don't often know you're standing inside one. At first, the experiments feel scattered. File here, university grant there. A hospital study, tucked beneath language so dry, nobody outside the room would ever stop to question it. The bureaucracy helps, because it's not there for the people. Strange things sound ordinary once buried beneath paperwork. Research, behavioral studies, psychological testing, and national security. These are things that we've talked about on the channel before, too. So you already know where this goes. The word's polished smooth enough to stop curiosity before it starts, sure. And inside CIA circles, fear always justifies escalation. The Cold War does that to people. Every rumor feels urgent. Every enemy breakthrough feels existential. If the Soviets are learning something, America cannot afford to fall behind. And that sentence becomes permission for a lot of dangerous decisions. Imagine secure meetings late at night, fluorescent lights buzzing, men loosening ties, rubbing tired eyes over reports dense with speculation and possibility. And someone asks, well, how far can this go? And no one answers immediately because once experiments begin, limits become negotiable. Can drugs make interrogation easier? Can fear become programmable? Could memory be interrupted? Could loyalty weaken? Can a person become more suggestible? Well, these questions stack and the line shifts, almost invisibly. The testing no longer belongs only inside of these controlled rooms. Now it's leaking outward, into bars, apartments, hotels, and safe houses. Places ordinary enough to feel forgettable. Some CIA operations begin using prostitutes to lure men into monitored rooms, while the drugs are administered and behavior is observed from behind concealed observation points. In a dimly lit room with cheap furniture, ashtrays slowly filling in the hum of a city outside the hotel window, a man believes he is entering an ordinary night, while unseen eyes are watching him quietly. There's no informed consent, he gets no warning, just hidden experimentation wrapped inside of normal life. And elsewhere, universities and hospitals receive money. Researchers run studies, sometimes fully aware, sometimes only partly aware of who sits behind funding streams. Human beings become variables, just subjects and data. Some volunteer, others don't fully understand what they're agreeing to. Others, according to later investigations, did not know at all. And then comes one of the story's darker shadows. A scientist named Frank Olson. Connected to biological warfare work. One night in 1953, during a retreat with colleagues, Olson is secretly dosed with LSD by the CIA personnel as part of experimentation. Now imagine the moment without him knowing. Conversation and drinks seem like an ordinary evening, and then something begins to feel wrong. Reality starts to loosen its grip, and thoughts become very fluid, and his fear grows. In the days afterward, Olson struggles mentally. Friends start to notice, and his superiors start to worry. Then, days later, he falls from a hotel window in New York. And for years, this story sat beneath official explanations. Oh, it was an accident. Later investigations reopen uncomfortable possibilities, and debate around Olson's death never fully disappears. Modern conspiracies do something that ancient ones rarely do. They hide inside classification, inside sealed documents, inside missing context, inside truths revealed slowly sometimes, decades, years, sometimes never. Most Americans know nothing about the LSD experiments, or about secret funding and hidden testing. Nothing about people quietly becoming pieces inside a classified puzzle. The conspiracy survives because secrecy survives. Until eventually, the walls begin cracking. Not from spies and not from heroic raids, from paperwork, from investigations and committees, and a government finally beginning reluctantly to look inside itself. The cracks begin quietly, not with some whistleblower sprinting into daylight carrying stolen folders. Not with a raid nor a smoking gun dropped dramatically on a desk. Just paper and questions. A changing country is suddenly less willing to trust power. Because by the 1970s, America feels different. Government promises breaking under public scrutiny. Suspicion becomes a cultural norm. And somewhere inside Washington, people start asking uncomfortable questions about institutions once treated almost like untouchable machinery. The intelligence world is starting to get nervous at this point. Imagine dim offices stacked with their filing cabinets and classified folders. Men who spend careers believing secrecy equals survival, now sensing the political weather turning against them. The questions start to come faster and the oversight on them sharpens. And inside the CIA, someone makes a decision to destroy the records. Not all of them, but more than enough. In 1973, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered much of the MKUltra documentation destroyed. Boxes of folders and reports, years of experiments reduced to shreds and flames. The mechanical finality of paper disappearing. Maybe someone watches pages curl and blacken without fully appreciating what history is actually losing. Maybe someone understands exactly what it is because secrecy has instincts. The secrecy protects itself. And for a while it almost works. Almost. The story threatens to disappear into bureaucracy forever, leaving just rumors. Then history does something conspiracies hate. It leaves leftovers. A mistake. Thousands of financial records survive in storage, overlooked. And these are budgets, invoices, fragments of paperwork, and experimental information. But enough to begin rebuilding shape around the absence of the other paperwork. And meanwhile, Washington keeps changing. The investigations gather momentum. The United States Senate Select Committee to study governmental operations with respect to intelligence activities, better remembered quite simply as the Church Committee, begins pulling at threads. Picture hearing rooms under harsh lights, senators seated behind microphones, stacks of paper, and reporters leaning forward. The atmosphere tense, tired, and skeptical. America's watching institutions investigate institutions. Kind of a strange thing. We've investigated ourselves and found no wrongdoing. A democracy pulling back the curtain on itself. Witnesses speak and files surface. Programs once buried beneath classified language suddenly gains names ordinary people can hear. Assassination plots, domestic surveillance, secret experimentation, and then MKUltra, the use of LSD on unconsenting Americans, psychological manipulation, safe houses doubling as CIA's personal red light district, experiments conducted without informed consent. Imagine Americans hearing fragments of this for the first time. A father at a dinner table pausing halfway through coffee, someone staring at a television coverage thinking, wait, our government did what? Because this conspiracy feels different from kings poisoned or politicians bugging offices. Those stories happen on ordinary people. This one touches something deeper. The terrifying possibility that institutions quietly experiment while citizens never even know that they're standing inside the experiment. And then Frank Olson's story resurfaces. Questions reopen and get asked again. Old explanations suddenly sound a lot thinner. And the family's starting to ask harder questions. Journalists are digging now. You got lawyers circling. There's no certainty in this left. Modern conspiracies rarely offer certainty, but enough documented truth to permanently change public imagination. Because once a government admits secret experimentation on human beings, even partially, people begin wondering what else lives behind those locked doors. And that is the strange legacy of MKUltra. The conspiracy itself fractures under scrutiny, investigated and exposed in pieces. The documents burned, but never fully erased, and afterwards, something else shifts in the culture. Because now, when people hear wild claims about secret programs and hidden experiments, some part of the public remembers one uncomfortable fact. Once before, something dismissed as impossible, it turned out to be real. The next conspiracy does not hide in government vaults. No classified files on this one. No secret Senate hearings. No dim intelligence safe houses operating behind locked doors. Instead, it hides in something millions of people trust without thinking. A car. A very ordinary, very familiar car. By the early 2000s, diesel use started gaining ground. It's cleaner, companies said, more efficient, practical, good mileage without sacrificing performance. And one company pushes that promise harder than anyone. Volkswagen. The company projects confidence, engineering excellence, precision, German reliability wrapped in polished advertisements and careful language. Bright dealership lights reflecting off of clean paint, salespeople smiling beside gleaming cars, commercials promising efficiency and environmental responsibility in the same breath. Clean diesel. The phrase sounded reassuring, responsible even. A machine powerful enough to move fast and somehow still behave kindly toward the planet? For consumers, it felt like a simple choice. You buy the car, and you trust the numbers. Your miles per gallon, your emissions, and your certifications. This is what modern life quietly runs on. Trust in systems too complicated to personally verify. Because no one buying a car stands in their driveway running emissions chemistry. People assume somebody checked, somebody tested, somebody honest signed paperwork, and for a while, everything looks perfect. Diesel sales rise, praise arrives for the company, and environmental messaging lands pretty well. The company grows bolder, more ambitious, and more confident, but somewhere behind the glass offices and engineering departments, a problem begins. The problem begins quietly at first, ugly enough that nobody wants to say it plainly. The engines struggle, meeting strict emission standards while preserving performance, cost targets, and efficiency prove harder than executives and engineers had hoped. Much harder. Imagine the conference rooms, technical charts glowing across the screens while engineers share numbers, refusing to behave. Someone rubs tired eyes, someone's recalculating, because deadlines do not care about engineering frustration. Targets remain targets. Cars must launch. Promises already live in the advertisements, and somewhere in those rooms, the dangerous question appears. The question corporate conspiracies always reach eventually. What if we stop solving the problem and we start hiding it? At first, it sounds temporary. Just a workaround, a patch for now. Something to survive the deadlines. Just enough to get through testing. The sort of compromise people quietly promise themselves they'll fix later. Then software enters the story. Imagine an engineer staring at screens glowing in dark office light, not plotting villainy, not twirling a metaphorical mustache, just trying to solve impossible problems on a deadline. The software learns to recognize test conditions, wheel movement, and speed patterns, in laboratory circumstances. Moments when the vehicle realizes, I am being tested, and during those moments, the engine behaves differently, cleaner and more controlled, passing emissions requirements, but outside the lab, on real roads with real drivers, the rules quietly change. Performance returns and pollution rises. No warning, no blinking light, no obvious signal to owners. Just invisible trickery hidden beneath ordinary driving. Ancient conspiracies whispered in rooms. Modern conspiracies hiding code. Quite enough that millions of people can participate without realizing that they're participating at all. And for now, life continues. Families buy their cars. Dealerships celebrate sales. Executives smile through presentations. The conspiracy works because ordinary trust works. Until someone notices that the numbers feel wrong. At first, it feels boring. No dramatic leak, no nervous insider whispering in a parking garage, no midnight confession, just some researchers. The kind of work most people imagine happening somewhere far away in rooms that they never think about. Because the first crack in this conspiracy does not begin with outrage, it begins with curiosity. The researchers at West Virginia University, working alongside the International Council on Clean Transportation, start comparing emissions in the real world. Now imagine their mood, laptops glowing inside a cramped workspace as coffee rings staining their papers, and the faint smell of electronics warming against long hours. People expecting routine results, nothing historic. They tested diesel vehicles outside laboratory conditions, and something feels wrong. The numbers don't behave. Imagine staring at data expecting neat lines, but instead finding just chaos. Vehicles certified as clean suddenly emitting nitrogen oxides far above legal limits. Not slightly above, massively above. At first, maybe the disbelief wins. Is it bad equipment? Maybe it's a testing error. So, they rerun things. They double-check their assumptions, because if numbers feel impossible, then scientists distrust themselves before accusing the world. They run everything again, and get the same results. Still wrong. One Volkswagen diesel emits pollution dozens of times above allowable standards under real conditions. Yet inside the lab, perfectly compliant. Once you notice contradiction, you have to start asking dangerous questions. Imagine these quiet conversations, someone leaning back from a screen, silence hanging. Then, how could this happen? Mechanical defect? Maybe it's a calibration issue. Do you think it's something accidental? Or the thought that nobody wants immediately to have to admit. Intentional manipulation. Well, the findings move upward, reports get submitted, questions start being asked, and regulators get involved. And suddenly rooms inside Volkswagen begin getting smaller. Executives and engineers hear concerns, meetings multiply. Imagine conference rooms in Germany. Glass walls, pressed shirts, spreadsheets glowing across screens, while uncomfortable questions land harder and harder each week. American regulators ask for explanation. Why do emissions behave differently in real-world driving? Well, the company responds. What's a technical issue? It's a software glitch. Fixes are promised. Explanations made very carefully, but the explanations keep fraying, because regulators, they keep testing, and eventually the trap tightens. In the same way that many conspiracies tighten, questions become specific. Evidence stacks too neatly. And somewhere inside Volkswagen, people likely begin understanding something terrible. This will not stay hidden, and the sentence no one wants to say out loud. If they discover the software, we're done. Because hidden beneath engines sit code designed not to improve performance, but to deceive. A defeat device. Software recognizing tests and behaving differently to fool the regulators. This wasn't an accident or coincidence, it was designed and intentional. And for a while, silence holds. But then, in 2015, someone finally admits it. The moment arrives, strangely quiet after something this enormous. Just quiet acknowledgement. Millions of vehicles affected. Millions. Cars sold across multiple countries. Consumers trusting their certifications. Government trusting compliance. A global company quietly gaming environmental standards for years. Imagine the realization spreading, news anchors blinking through disbelief, owners standing beside cars in driveways thinking, wait, my car? Employees wondering who knows what and when did they know it? Executives are calculating fallout faster than thought can process, because modern conspiracies, they fail differently than the ancient ones. Ancient conspirators lose battles. Modern conspiracies, they lose trust. And trust, once gone, turns catastrophically expensive. And the fallout lands slowly at first, because scandals measured in millions do not explode. They spread across countries, across headlines, and across dinner tables, where ordinary people suddenly discover the machine sitting quietly in a driveway belongs to a story much larger than just transportation. Imagine the mood inside of Volkswagen's offices at this point. Conference rooms suddenly way too full, lawyers arriving faster than the engineers, executives speaking in clipped sentences while screens glow with numbers nobody wants to say out loud. The math gets ugly real quick. Owners stare at news reports with disbelief. Same commercials promising engineering precision now replay strangely in memory. Clean diesel. The phrase starts sounding haunted, because trust breaks awkwardly. You remember believing that this is the uncomfortable part. A family buys a car thinking they're making a responsible choice. A commuter drives to work, never imagining software quietly changes behavior depending on who's watching. No smoke pouring from the engines, no dramatic warning lights, just invisible deception hidden beneath ordinary life. right under the hood. So the investigations, they widen. Executives begin testifying and documents start to surface. Emails are getting reread with new eyes, and somewhere buried inside of these meetings and technical decisions sits the unsettling realization modern conspiracies keep teaching us. You do not always need secrecy held together by fear. Sometimes all you need is incentives, pressure, targets, deadlines, enough that people begin quietly telling themselves, just this once. Just until launch. Just until we can solve it properly. Until temporary deception hardens into a routine. Conspiracies are beginning to evolve. Ancient conspiracies needed whispered loyalty, daggers, and secret letters. The modern ones, they emerge inside institutions so large nobody feels personally responsible. One engineer changes code, another signs paperwork, someone higher up avoids asking difficult questions. Someone else convinces themselves performance targets matter more, and nobody wakes up saying, "Today, we create a global scandal." Instead, small compromises pile into catastrophes, and eventually the bill arrives. Volkswagen agreed to tens of billions in penalties, buybacks, settlements, criminal cases, environmental consequences. They got hit. Engineers and executives end up terminated. The company survives, bruised and permanently tied to this scandal, because that is the strange thing about conspiracy in the modern world. Sometimes the secret isn't hidden underground. It ships to millions of people, and afterwards something lingers. Questions. If software can quietly deceive regulators, and if institutions trusted by millions can hide reality inside systems too technical for ordinary people to verify, then what else might powerful organizations quietly justify behind closed doors? And that question leads us somewhere stranger. Not a government, not a corporation, but an organization powerful enough and secretive enough and determined enough to quietly place operatives inside government offices themselves. A conspiracy so ambitious, it begins with paperwork and ends with the largest infiltration of the US government in history. Its name, Operation Snow White. The first thing to understand about Snow White is this. Nobody involved thinks that they're villains. Conspiracies rarely feel sinister from the inside anyways. They feel justified. By the 1970s, the world surrounding the Church of Scientology feels hostile. Or at least hostile from the organization's perspective. Governments investigating them and journalists criticizing them. Former members start speaking publicly, tax disputes start. Agencies inside the United States government hold files on Scientology stretching back years. To leadership, especially people close to founder L. Ron Hubbard, this does not feel like bureaucracy. It feels like an attack. Imagine offices late at night, fluorescent lights humming, papers stacked high, ashtrays filling slowly, voices low but intense, a belief hardening that enemies exist everywhere. The IRS, the FBI, the Department of Justice, foreign governments, newspapers, critics. Everybody's an enemy. Basically anyone that wasn't buying the aliens they're selling. People inside Scientology begin using a phrase that shapes everything. Dead agent. Neutralize critics and discredit accusations, protect the organization at all costs, and eventually, another idea grows beside it. What if we stop reacting to files held about us and start getting the files ourselves? And at the center of this story stands a woman named Mary Sue Hubbard. She's not a background figure in this either. She was the leader of Scientology's Guardian's office, and this is their internal organization that was tasked with their intelligence, legal defense, public relations, and protecting Scientology from any perceived enemies. Now imagine her world. Phones ringing, folders marked confidential, messengers moving quickly through offices, where urgency feels constant, people arriving with reports, government letters, legal threats, rumors, and suspicion. Everything feeding one uncomfortable institutional belief. They're watching us. And once people become convinced that they're under siege, boundaries move. The operation takes shape. Its name, Operation Snow White. Harmless sounding. Almost absurdly gentle for what it becomes. At first, the goal sounds almost bureaucratic. Gather information, correct records, according to church will. Remove any damaging material, but conspiracies have appetite, and appetites grow. The paper locked inside government buildings begins to feel intolerable to these church leaders, so the strategy changes. Not requests or lawsuits, direct infiltration. Imagine the first conversations. No dramatic orchestral music, no secret lair. Well, maybe there's a secret lair, who knows? Mostly just practical discussion. Could someone get inside? Could someone work there? Can the documents be copied? And slowly people begin moving on this. Scientology operatives seek clerical positions and secretarial work. The government jobs ordinary enough to avoid attention. Filing, typing, paper movement. The sort of roles invisible to most people. And that invisibility becomes the power of the operation. Because modern institutions run on paperwork. And paperwork moves through hands that nobody notices. In the Washington offices in the 1970s, the buzzing fluorescent lights and typewriters hammering rhythmically, alongside stacks of folders tied neatly with string, coffee staining papers on desks, and employees filing documents while nobody thinks twice about another government worker moving quietly through the hallways. Except sometimes that worker's carrying instructions. Copy this, photograph that, remove a file briefly, return it before anyone notices. No smashed windows or midnight burglaries, just office routine being quietly weaponized. And the operation spreads. Not just one office or even two, but many agencies. Within the IRS, the Department of Justice, and several other federal agencies, even foreign offices in a few cases. Hidden cameras, false identification, stolen keys, documents photographed in bathrooms, offices, and hallways. Imagine the tension. In a locked room, hands trembling while papers are turning too quickly. The sound of footsteps outside are suddenly too loud. A copier humming. Conspiracies built from bureaucracy feel strangely intimate. There's no explosions. There's no speeches. Just people trying very hard to look ordinary while carrying out something deeply abnormal. And for a while, as with all conspiracies, it works. Disturbingly well in this case. The files move and information flows where they wanted it to. Government records quietly copied, delivered back to Scientology leadership, and the operation grows large enough that people inside begin believing something dangerous. We're getting away with it. That feeling, the feeling of getting away with it, is where conspiracies become reckless, because success changes people. Careful people get confident. Confident people stop noticing risk. And risk quietly begins piling up. Imagine a government office late in the afternoon. Fluorescent lights are buzzing softly overhead, filing cabinets half open, someone loosening a tie after a long shift, while typewriters slowly, one by one, move into silence. Nothing dramatic, nothing suspicious. It's just bureaucracy ending another ordinary day. Except somewhere nearby, documents move twice. A file checked out, copied, returned. A memo photograph. A locked drawer opened by someone who should not know what's inside. The conspiracy grows so large, it almost starts behaving like routine. And that is dangerous, because by now, Operation Snow White reaches an astonishing scale. Not one infiltrator, not one office, but networks. Communications flowing back through Scientology's Guardian office, reports being compiled, targets tracked, information cataloged. The mission expands beyond simply learning what governments know. Some operatives allegedly begin seeking to remove, alter, or neutralize records viewed as hostile towards Scientology. Now imagine the psychology here. You believe institutions unfairly attack your organization. You believe government files contain information damaging lives and futures. Inside that mindset, extraordinary actions stop feeling extraordinary. They begin to feel righteous. People rarely say we're committing espionage. They say we are defending ourselves. Meanwhile, inside federal agencies, tiny inconsistencies started surfacing. Missing document here and there, odd access points, questions that feel too small to matter. At first, nothing connects, and why would it? Government bureaucracy loses paper constantly. Misfiles happen, mistakes happen. Washington practically runs on clerical confusion. But patterns have gravity. Eventually somebody notices too many strange things clustering around the same places. Too much access, a little too much copying, and definitely too much interest. And somewhere inside law enforcement, attention focuses, because conspiracies are fragile in one particular way. The larger they become, the more people can fail. Nervous operative, a sloppy procedure, an instruction misunderstood, a wrong person overhearing the wrong thing. Imagine investigators slowly reconstructing shape from these fragments. Receipts, a name here or there, a random address, connections between people who should not be connected, the feeling of something larger sitting just beyond sight. Then comes the moment conspiracies hate the most, the moment where suspicion becomes evidence. In 1977, federal agents raid Scientology offices in Washington, D.C. and Los Angeles. Morning lights barely settled, doors get kicked open, boxes are seized, files are gathered, papers everywhere. The smell of dust and stale office air are suddenly mixing with the adrenaline, and people are standing frozen while investigators begin pulling at threads hidden for years. And the threads just keep coming. Documents, instructions, internal communications, all proof of infiltration and covert operations. Enough to reveal something almost unbelievable in scale. Operatives tied to Scientology quietly infiltrate multiple U.S. government agencies and steal thousands of documents. This is not a rumor. It's paper backed up and evidence. The kind modern conspiracies always fear. And suddenly, the organization that spends years believing government watches them faces something deeply ironic. The government investigators are now watching back. And somewhere near the center of the storm stands Mary Sue Hubbard. The woman helping oversee an operation so vast it eventually becomes known as the largest infiltration of the United States government in history by a non-state organization. For people inside Scientology, the moment feels catastrophic. For investigators, it feels like vindication. And for outsiders, it's kind of just bewildering. Because who imagines clerks, secretaries, filing cabinets, and office routines quietly becoming one of the strangest conspiracies of the 20th century? And maybe that is the unsettling thing about Snow White. There were no explosions, no secret assassins or midnight revolutions, just simple routine paperwork. Ordinary people moving through ordinary offices until ordinary shows out to be espionage. The trials arrive slowly. Paperwork first, then indictments. Evidence boxes and affidavits dense enough to make your eyes blur halfway down the page. And not a dramatic justice, a quiet, administrative justice. Imagine federal prosecutors late at night beneath fluorescent lights, coffee cooling on their legal pads, documents spread across tables in careful stacks while investigators are trying to explain something that still sounds faintly unbelievable when spoken out loud. People tied to a religious organization infiltrated government offices, stole documents, copied files, ran covert operations, and coordinated information gathering across agencies. And unlike older conspiracies, there is paper everywhere. Internal memos, instructions, communications, the kind of evidence conspirators hate because paper remembers. Soon, convictions start to follow. Multiple Scientology officials plead guilty or are convicted in connection to Snow White, including Mary Sue Hubbard, who receives prison time. Members of the Guardian's office also fall with her. Careers collapse and reputations absolutely fracture. The Church of Scientology reorganizes internally in the years afterwards, and the Guardian's office eventually disappears, replaced by new structures and, hovering strangely above all of it, the absence of one man, L. Ron Hubbard. And the founder lives increasingly removed from public view during much of this time period. And his exact level of operational knowledge becomes fiercely disputed depending on who's telling the story. Critics point one direction, defenders another, courts convict people around him, and historians argue and former insiders disagree. So here at the end of History of Conspiracy, you begin to see the pattern shift one more time. Think about where we've started. In Egypt, the queen and palace insiders allegedly conspire to remove a pharaoh. In Sparta, resentment whispers through marketplaces. In Rome, senators meet behind closed doors, imagining power rearranged. In London, barrels waited beneath Parliament. And for thousands of years, these conspiracies felt intimate, up close. A handful of frightened people changing history through proximity. Then something changes. Governments begin to expand, institutions grow, corporations expand, and technology changes. And conspiracy grows and changes right along with them. Now, it hides inside bureaucracies, inside software and intelligence programs, inside filing systems and organizations, convincing themselves they are protecting something important. The shape changes, but the instinct stays strangely familiar. Fear, power, secrecy, and justification. Imagine standing back and looking across the whole timeline. Palace chamber in Egypt, smelling of incense and sweat, a Spartan market thick with dust and resentment, Roman senators whispering behind lamplight, gunpowder sleeping beneath Parliament, tape recorders humming quietly inside the White House, the CIA files with that classified stamp, software hidden inside engines, and government clerks quietly copying documents. Thousands of years. Different clothes, different technology, but the same uncomfortable question keeps repeating itself. What do people do when they believe normal systems stop serving them? Sometimes the answer becomes violence, and sometimes conspiracy theories grow in empty space afterwards, because here is one of the strange philosophical twists hiding underneath everything. Real conspiracies exist, clearly and with much documentation. We've just spent hours walking through them. Kings murdered, governments infiltrated, cover-ups exposed. But real conspiracies create a problem. Once people learn powerful institutions sometimes lie, sometimes spy, that trust becomes fragile. And when trust becomes fragile, imagination, it rushes in. And that's where conspiracy theory is born. In the uncomfortable gap of trust between sometimes they are really plotting, and sometimes we begin seeing plots everywhere. The danger is not in believing every conspiracy. The danger is not in dismissing every conspiracy either. History punishes both of those mistakes. Because somewhere between paranoia and blind trust, between the cynicism and naivete, is the hardest position of all: skepticism. The willingness to ask the hard questions without letting our fears invent the answers for us.